This is Module 3, Lesson 3, Real-World Positive and Negative Numbers and Zero. Today, we're going to take a look at this picture. And this picture is of, obviously, a mountain climber, you can tell, a sailboat, and a person inside the ocean. That's actually someone who's under the ocean. If you look closely, you can see the hiker. He says he is he's hiking, so he is above sea level. The sailboat says that I'm sailing, so I'm at sea level. And the scuba diver says I'm diving, so I'm below sea level. The question becomes, if we were to draw a line, a number line, a vertical number line, where would our zero be? And so since we're talking about sea level, and I won't get too much into sea level except to say the level is where the water is, and then everything above it is above sea level, and anything below the surface of the ocean is considered below sea level. So keeping that in mind, that makes sea level where our zero would be. So if we were to draw a number line, our zero would be here. Well, on a two-dimensional figure, it still looks like it's below. So the surface where the boat is, that's where on top of the water. And so that's where a zero would be. Okay? So since we can't draw it on a two-dimensional level because it still looks like we'd be drawing it under sea level, we can go ahead and draw it on the side here. But in this case, our zero, what changes between above and below sea level is where our zero is. So that's going to be sea level. So that if the scuba diver is below sea level, then the scuba diver is in the negative zone. And if the mountain climber is above sea level, then the mountain climber is in the positive zone, up here. Okay? So that being the case, now we look at the exercises. It says to refer back to what I just talked about and use the information to answer the questions. So if the scuba diver is 30 feet below sea level, well, let's go see what the questions are going to be. They want us to write an integer to represent each situation. That refers back to here. So if the scuba diver is 30 feet below sea level, the integer that we would use to represent below sea level is negative 30. And that's the integer. We wouldn't say 30 feet. We wouldn't say, because they're only asking us for an integer. All right, if we go back, the sailor at sea level, well, I showed you here, sea level would be 0. So at sea level is going to be just 0. No positive, no negative. Remember that 0 is neither positive nor negative. The last one is the hiker is 2 miles above sea level. That means they started at the sea level and they counted it up. So above sea level would be positive 2. Remember that a positive, we write just the 2 and not necessarily the positive sign. Okay, so moving on. Use an appropriate scale to graph each of the following situations on the number line to the right. Also, write an integer to represent both situations. So the appropriate scale means that when we're looking at this blank number line here, we have to determine where we want to put our zero and where our other numbers are going to be. And so how many increments would each line be? Well, if you look at the examples, a hiker is 15 feet above sea level and a diver is 20 feet below sea level. Well, one of the things it says to do is to write an integer, so we can do that first. A hiker that is 15 feet above sea level would be, the integer would be positive 15. But a diver that's 20 feet below sea level, the below means it has to be negative. See how the above means positive? The below means negative. So it is negative 20. Now the next thing we have to do is over here at our number line, figure out where we can put all this. We have to show both negative and positive numbers. Right away when I look at 15 and 20, I think of multiples of 5, which is pretty easy. So let me see if I went from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are 9 lines. Okay, so if we went 1, 2, 3, 4, we can make this our 0 because it looks pretty even. It's not always the case. The 0 can sometimes be above. If we had to write more negative numbers, we could do it that way. Over here, we could make our 0. We could make our 0 lower if we had to write more positive numbers. So we could make our 0 over here. But for the case of what we're doing, it looks like we have both positive and negative numbers. It makes sense to put it right in the middle. So if we're going in increments of 5, this would be 5. Where's our 0? This one would be 5, 10, 15, and 20. Likewise, below that would be negative 5, negative 10, negative 15, and negative 20. Okay, so now I can plot these right on here. That's what it's called when you're putting the line, plotting it. So the first one is positive 15, and I'm going to do that one in red. That will be right here. And the next one is negative 20. I'm going to do that one in blue, and that will be right there. And that's all we were supposed to do. So the next one, number 3, we're going to go on to the next page to do it. Number 3 says, for each statement, there are 2 related statements, I and double I. That's this and this. Determine which related statement is expressed correctly and then circle it. Then correct the other related statement so that both parts I and II are stated correctly. So let's do what we do before. What's this asking us to find? So first, it's asking us to circle. It's asking us to circle. And then it's asking us to correct. So we have to circle what's correct and then correct what's not correct. All right, now we know what we're going to do. Oh, we have to do one more thing. Circle and then correct by stating it correctly. Correct the other statement. Okay, that makes sense. We'll leave it at that. A submarine is submerged 800 feet below sea level. Now, we did this in just yesterday's lesson, the last lesson. So, a submarine is submerged 800 feet below sea level. The depth of the submarine can be described as, or the depth of the submarine is, negative 800 feet below sea level. And the other one says, 800 feet below sea level can be represented by the integer negative 800. Well, if you look at this one, and you remember what we did in the other lesson, lesson 2, where I first taught you how to write things correctly, this first one is written wrong. So the depth of the submarine is negative 800 feet below sea level is not correct because we cannot say negative 800 and then below. You just can't do that. It's not allowed. You can say one or the other. You can't say them both the way it's written here. So that one is not correct. The second one says 800 feet below sea level. Well, that's correct. Can be represented by the integer negative 800. So this is correct because it talks about negative 800 just being an integer and that it's being represented. So really, this is the part that we're looking at right here. 800 feet below sea level. And that is a true statement. So we can say that is true. And then we look at the second part of that statement where it talks about the integer for negative, for below sea level would be negative 800. That is also correct. So this one is a correct answer. Now the second part of this was that we had to correct the first one. So how would we correct the depth of the submarine is negative 800 feet below sea level? Let's see if you remember how to do that. Okay, so we cannot say negative 800 and below, but we can say just 800 below. We can't use a negative and below, but we can use one or the other. So we can say the depth of the submarine is 800 feet below sea level. We could also say the depth of the submarine is negative 800 feet and just not use the word below. I just chose to use it that way. Okay? Let's look at the next one. The elevation of a coral reef with respect to sea level, which means using sea level as your guide, is is given at negative 150 feet. So what does that mean? When it says with respect to sea level, it means we're using sea level as our zero. Okay? If sea level is our zero, where would negative 150 feet be? Well, number 1 says the coral reef is 150 feet below sea level. Sorry, letter I. Letter II, or number 2, says the depth of the coral reef is negative 150 feet below sea level. So which one of these is actually correct? Okay, since it says 150 feet below sea level, the one below it says negative and then below, and we told you can't do that, this one has to be correct. Okay? So if this next one is incorrect, now the next part of our problem is we have to correct it. So how would we correct the depth of the coral reef is negative 150 feet below sea level? We don't want to write the same thing that was up here. So you have to write something different. And what you can end up writing is the elevation of a coral reef is negative 150 feet. That is a correct statement. We don't have to say with respect to the sea level. That was for our purposes of what we're doing. Okay, let's look at the next page. Okay, so here's where we're going to do what was in the previous lesson, lesson 2. It's similar to what you've already had, so this should be easy answers. These are going to be the answers that you get to do. A debit of $40. Sorry, let's go back and look at the directions. We need to write an integer to match the following descriptions. An integer means we're not using the dollar sign. We're only writing either positive or negative numbers, positive and negative integers. Okay? We don't have to write the positive sign, by the way. Okay, so here we go. The first one says a debit of $40. Well, a debit of $40 would be positive 40. Okay? Oh, nope, it would not. It would be negative because it's a debit. Can't forget that. Okay. A deposit of $225 would be, there's where our positive is, 225. Okay? 14,000 feet above sea level, sorry. 14,000 feet above sea level. That would be a positive 14,000 because it is above sea level. Okay. A temperature increase of 40 degrees. A temperature increase of 40 degrees would be a positive 40, even though, and let's use an example here. If I had my thermometer, let's say my 0 was here, and let's say I was at negative 80 degrees below. It was really cold. I'm on Antarctica or maybe some other planet, and it's negative 80 degrees below, and this is Fahrenheit. Okay? If I increased it to 40 degrees, or had an increase of 40 degrees, I didn't increase it to 40, but if I had an increase of 40 degrees, that would mean I'm heading up here, and the way I'm going is positive. I'm heading up towards the positive. Even though I would end up still at negative 40 degrees, the way I'm moving to get there is towards positive. So that's why this is called positive 40 degrees, because of the word increase, not because of where it might be on the line. Okay, that's going to come into play in the future, so I want you to make sure you understand that. Letter E says a withdrawal of $225. Yeah, that one is negative 225. And the last one says 14,000 feet below sea level. And that is negative 14,000. Very good. Okay, for this next one, it says for problems 2 through 4, read each statement about a real-world situation and the two related statements in parts A and B carefully. Circle, here's one of our things we have to do, the correct way to describe each real-world situation. Possible answers could be, we can say A, B, or both A and B are correct. Okay? It does not say we have to rewrite it. So that's one thing we don't have to do. So for the first one, a whale is 600 feet below the surface of the ocean. How do we say it? Is it A, the depth of the whale is 600 feet from the ocean surface? Is it B, the whale is negative 600 feet below the surface of the ocean? I'm going to read them again. The depth of the whale is 600 feet from the ocean surface, or the whale is negative 600 feet below the surface of the ocean. A whale is 600 feet below the surface of the ocean is what number 2 says. So which answer is correct? Okay, so hopefully you didn't get caught up on the negative and the below, because that one is not correct. A is the correct answer. The reason why this says it is because this is correct and this one is not. Is number 2 says a whale is 600 feet below. You can say that because it doesn't say negative 600 and then below. B says the negative and the below. So this can't be right because you can't have both of them. You can have one or the other. So the depth of the whale is 600 feet from the ocean surface. The fact that it used the word depth tells you that it's below. Okay, so be careful. Some of these vocabulary words will trip you up every time. Okay, number 3. The elevation of the bottom of an iceberg with respect to sea level is given as negative 125 feet. Is it A, the iceberg is 125 feet above sea level? Or B, the iceberg is 125 feet below sea level? Okay, the iceberg is 125 feet below sea level. You had to be one or the other on this one. The elevation of the iceberg with respect to sea level, that means sea level is 0, is given at negative 125 feet. So if you're doing it, that would be here. What we're talking about, the bottom of the iceberg would be down here. And so the iceberg is 125 feet below sea level. Okay? All right, let's go to number 3. Number 4. I did it on this page. It's easier. Right here. Alex's temperature decreased by 2 degrees. So A, Alex's body temperature dropped 2 degrees. B, the integer negative 2 represents the change in Alex's body temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. Which one is correct? Okay, so for this one, they're actually both correct. Alex's body temperature dropped 2 degrees. So the drop is the same as decrease. So that's correct. And then B says the integer negative 2 represents the change in Alex's body temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. The fact that they use the word integer and negative 2 shows that it went down. If you were in a thermometer, and let's say here was where his temperature was at 101 degrees, and it dropped by 2 degrees, that would bring you down to 99 degrees. And we don't care about this part so much. We care about the drop. The drop means it headed towards a negative. Even though it wasn't in negative, it headed downward, and downward in this case is negative 2. It's not at negative 2, it just went down by 2. So that's where that comes in. Positive and negative in terms of understanding what they mean can be challenging sometimes. Okay, let's look at number 5. Number 5 says, okay, number 5, there's A, B, C, D, and E. And unlike we like to do, we're not going to pick one, we're going to do each one. So we're going to do A here, right below it, and then B, then C. So, well, you might start by counting by 5s because both are multiples of 5. And this was our A. So our B says, what integer represents a credit of $35 if 0 represents the original balance? And so what they want to say is, if we had a number line, and we put a 0 here, and this was the original balance, okay, which would not necessarily be zero. So for example, if I had $50 in my account already, that would be my original amount of money, $50. And so based on that, if this is what my original amount of money is, and I had a credit of 35, what would the integer be? Positive or negative? Now, I've already given you that answer, but let's see if you have it anyway. So one thing you could say is that it would be a positive 35 because it's a number that's greater than 0, and so it would be positive. So if we put in $35, it would be somewhere over here. And we would be increasing the amount of money we have, so it would also be positive for that reason. C says, what integer describes a debit of $40 if 0 represents the original balance? Again, we're starting, what that means is the original balance is right here. And now if we had a debit of $40, would it be on this side or on this side of our number line? And I'm going to erase our number line so that I can write it. So, what would a debit of $40? Again, I've already said this, so hopefully you remember what I said. So yes, that would be negative 40 because a debit is less than 0 and numbers that are less than 0 are negative. So looking at D now, based on the scale that we had before, describe the location of both integers on the number line. If we have our number line, and if our 0 is whatever our original amount of money was, and then we put money in and we took money out, where would they be on our number line? Would it be to the right of 0 or to the left? So let's start with the first one. The first one would be okay, if we had to describe what place it would be at for negative 40, we'll start with that one. We could say that it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units to the left. So for D, we could say that negative 40 is 8 units to the left of 0. And so negative 40 will be 8 units to the left of 0. But, so where that being the case, and we'll make it a little differently this time, let's draw a line here. Let's make our 0 here. It's our original number. That's not the of. It's just the original number. I have to write on my thing. Sorry. If this was 5, if this was in increments of 5, and we wanted to start at 0, how many units would we have to travel to get to 35? Well, we would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units, so 7 hops. So 35 would be 7 units to the, in this case, it's to the right of 0. Okay, notice that I have not asked you questions around this because this is still part of instructional stuff. E says, what does 0 represent in this situation? Well, I've mentioned this a few times to us already. So our 0, when we're talking about this in terms of this real world situation, when we start at 0, we're talking about our original amount in the bank account. Before we subtracted or added anything to it. Our original amount would be whatever it was. I told you $50, it could be $75, $175, it could be $2,000. Before you added or subtracted any money, before you had a debit or withdrawal, you would start at 0. And in this case, our 0 means the original amount. That's where it gets complicated with positive and negative numbers, but I don't want you to worry about that for this moment. Okay? So what does 0 represent in this situation? So what it means is 0 represents no change being made to the account balance. So before anything is subtracted or added. If we decided, you know what, we're not going to put any money in the account, we're not going to put any money out of the account, we would still end up, or take any money out of the account, we would just end up with our original amount. and that's where our zero begins. When we come to our bank account and we start figuring out we want to put money in or take money out, how much money we put in or take out becomes positive and negative based on where our zero is, which is our original amount. This has nothing to do with computing, subtracting the actual amount. It just has to do with where it lies on a number line. So don't let this complicate your life. It's not meant to be that complicated. Okay? So that's it for today. The next 2 days, you're going to work some more with some real-world situations. You'll get to work first with an IXL, which has to do with real-world situations, M.1. They're not that complicated when you first get started. They make it a little complicated as you get going. And then on Thursday, you're going to get to play 2 games. My expectation is that you'll play a game called Mania, and you may have to push the flash drive. Not flash drive. It won't say flash drive. When you first click on it, it's MathMan, not Mathmania, sorry. MathMan, and there's a link to it. And when you first click on it, it will say flash, and it has a picture of a puzzle piece. If you click on that, it should enable flash in order for you to play it. If it doesn't, just let me know, but it should, because that's what worked with all of mine, so it shouldn't be a problem. The other one is Legends of Learning. There are 2 pieces there that you should be playing. Not doing the scarecrow and not doing the one that says vocabulary. You'll be doing the one other than that. I'll try and take the other ones off. All right, have a good rest of the week. Remember that there is no school on Friday.